I really want to grow further and learn new things. Also in meetings with or in interaction with my backend colleagues, they always came up with those big words like AWS, Kubernetes, Terraform, whatever.
Could you tell us about your past experience when you were developing Android and Jetpack Compose and building a design system?
So in Jetpack Compose was, let me think.
You don't remember, I think.
I remember it. But what I
that you could.
What challenges you face when you switch from Android to Backend?
Challenges were, it is already quite big, this whole ecosystem, and you need to learn a lot of tiny pieces here and there and understand the whole setup of it.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Otaku channel. I'm Ali. Today we have another chat with one of the great software developer. We can just fetch some information and useful information about software industry and hope you find it useful. Okay, let's start. Hello Melanie, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm software developer since around 9 years. And initially I started out as an Android developer and recently decided to switch to the backend side of things.
Perfect. And could you tell when did you finish the Android and move to backend developer?
It happened last year, so mid of last year, I did finally the switch. I already had this in my mind since a few years actually, but in the previous company it was not so easy to do this. And when I switched companies, they are quite open for this. So I was also really supported by doing this switch. And yeah, last year it was finally the time where I could move forward and see something new.
I'm trying to read your mind. Was it because you see Android industry is a bit dangerous, KMP is coming, there is no job security for Android developers and you wanted to switch to backend, or it was any other reason?
For me personally, it was more, I did Android development for quite some years, so around 8 years or something. And I had the feeling that I've seen a lot of stuff already and that I really want to grow further and learn new things. Also in meetings with or in interaction with my backend colleagues, they always came up with those big words like AWS, Kubernetes, Terraform, whatever. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, or just really barely I know the term. And this made me a bit uncomfortable. So I decided, okay, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. Learn something new again.
Did you have any learning curve like before you asked for the new position, or you just asked, then along the way you learn all these Kubernetes and all the new technology?
I mean, I tried to prepare myself before, like reading up a bit and trying to learn ahead. But in the end, it turns now out into learning by doing. So I really learn on the fly, okay, what is this? And I also have colleagues, they are pretty supportive. So they are open to also teach people who don't know those tools yet, because also not every backend developer knows those things, to really teach me and share the knowledge with me.
Cool. And did you find it easy or difficult to switch to the backend developer as an Android developer?
In my case, what was easy is that we mainly use Kotlin in the current company I work for. So the code part is easy. It's done. I need to get used to the structures of the project. They differ a bit from an Android project because, you don't really have the view layer. You're not building any UI. So that's something new you have to deal with. So code-wise, I'm fine. Learning curve for the other tools, it's okay. But in my case, we have a really complex setup. So you really have to understand a lot of tiny pieces. And you have to get used to it. Also, as a mobile developer, you ship one APK, you send it to the App Store, it gets approved, and that's it. You don't really need to take care of the rest of the stuff. In our case, we also need to deploy all the services. We need to know about the environments. We need to know the differences of the environment. So there comes a lot of different tasks with it, not only coding-wise.
Okay, good to know. And I'm still an Android developer. I'm seeing the same, seeing different kind of difficulties with Android, and I don't know, we have great deal with UI, different type of release you could have with build variants. And don't you see these are equivalent difficulties you see in the backend and still have it on the Android side? Or you say, no, these are different things?
Yeah, they're in some parts similar, but you're still in your own ecosystem. So okay, yeah, it's Gradle, it's a different language which you need to use. But still, what is the same is the thought process of how to ship your application. So you can, of course, use some of the knowledge you gain from there. But also complicated setups in an Android app is not something which you always do. Mm-hmm. And maybe you never touch it. If you have a big team and I don't know, there is a platform team or something, you might not ever touch a complex build setup, flavor setup.
Don't you miss adding a very smooth and nice animation to a button, or just reducing the response time of a service?
Yeah, I have to say with Compose, it was really nice to build UI, and that I miss it sometimes. Yeah, especially when I see what my mobile colleagues did. But it's still soon. I do it for half a year now. But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, both would be still nice. Yeah.
It's quite interesting to me because I know you have a game development background as well. You are more into of the visual stuff and not having visual in the backend side. It's a little bit strange, maybe at the beginning, but that's why I'm asking about if you can tell a little bit more about when you was doing Android. I know you heavily were working on the Jetpack Compose and implementing the design system. Could you tell us a little bit more, like a story from Android development time?
In my Android development time, I did it for 8 years, so I saw quite a lot. Then I was also the Android lead for some time, so where I didn't code too much. So this was a totally different story. Also I could catch a sneak into game development. And yes, you're right, it's quite different from a backend perspective. But what is really nice about backend development, you also need to really see the bigger thing from, okay, I write code, how do I really bring it to the environments, how to make it as stable as possible for all other customers, because my customers are not necessarily the users. In some way they are, but it's mainly my colleagues working on any front-end application.
Could you tell us about your past experience when you were developing Android and Jetpack Compose and building a design system? I want to Android developer know a little bit of those experience you had in the past.
So in Jetpack Compose was, let me think.
You don't remember, I think.
I remember it. But what I now tell you, which is worth sharing, right? Because I started Android development when we still had to write a lot of XML and also without any libraries to make it easier for anyone. So changing to Compose was really nice. In the beginning, I was like, I can do this in XML. Why do I need something new? And then I did it and used it in, just handful of features. I was like, okay, I never want to go back. And I was lucky enough to have a chance to work on setting up this design system for the previous company I worked for.
Could you tell a little bit about design system for those who don't know what is that, how it helped an Android project, and then continue? Excuse me.
Sure. A design system is a definition of components like buttons, input fields, or your whole UI described in a way that it's reusable. So like Google has their material design, they have the same style for all of their buttons, they have enabled, disabled states. All those things are described in a single design system, and you build them in a way that those components are easily reusable for developers to have a consistent state through the whole app without the need that you need to discuss, each team needs to discuss the same thing again with different designers, because and another designer might design it differently. So to really have the consistency throughout the app. And when building something like this, you need to do a lot of groundwork to think about, together with designers, okay, what is this style which should go through the whole app? Which components are the most important ones? Because those are the components you're going to start with. What are you going to do with new components? How are you building them and who builds them? And those are all the questions we had to answer there. And then comes the technical part, because there are some solutions which you can use for this. How to build them and who maintains them on the technical side as well, and how to write them in a way that they're flexible enough. Like, I don't know, you might need a different set of buttons for different actions, a positive action, a negative action for cancel. So how do you design this also on a technical level? Those were the main challenges. And depending on the size of your app, it might be really a lot of work. So you need to teach the other teams how they should do it, how to make it reusable. Also with Compose, you need a lot of in-depth knowledge for some components so that they're efficient and not redrawing in ways you don't want to. Yeah, I would say those are the main challenges when setting up something like this.
I think it doesn't really make sense to build a design system for small applications with a small amount of people.
Yeah, not really. I would say that's not worth the overhead. Maybe also not an app where you're still in a phase of finding what your style should be. But yeah, this makes sense in a team which is growing bigger and bigger with multiple teams, with multiple mobile developers. I don't know, I would say 10 plus people on one app and more.
And I think the takeaway, what you said, would be having design system to have a unified component, same style, not having a padding problem or reusable component. I think these are like a benefit
exactly
from design system.
And also, you save a lot of time, because if it's clear what color value you should use, which paddings, margins, etc., you don't need to, you get a design and you don't always need to ask for, hey, I need paddings, I need color values, because the component is there. It has a name. You can use this component. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. And a little bit further about your game development. Tell us a little bit about that. Are you doing still game development?
So I always wanted to do game development when I studied. And I also really focused there on more of the few lessons we could do towards game development. I even tried to get some jobs in Vienna in the early stages, but we don't have so many companies in this area. And then I was like, okay, I will start with Android development. I learned this, have stable knowledge there, and I will try on the side in private projects to get something going. Then I worked in a lot of startups, so I did not have any time to do any of those. But then I had the chance to work for a startup, which was a game development company. And yeah, we worked on a VR game actually. So something totally different with, again, totally different challenges. And this was really nice. So I really enjoyed this. Sadly, startup gaming, it's really hard. So we ran out of money, which is a pity. But now I'm trying again to get back into doing some small games. So I started to look into what is out there, which engines are out there right now, what is the best engine to use for me as a single developer, trying to not lose the dream of doing that.
Is it difficult to switch to, or at least learn some game development as an Android developer?
That's a good question. I mean, the concepts are again really different. Most of the engines don't require too much coding. So many of the things you can do without too much coding knowledge, because you have some scripting languages, and many of the basic things you need for a game are kind of inbuilt already, which makes it nice and accessible also for non-developers. And if you need help, there's a lot of resources on the internet. What is tricky, that you need a lot of other skills next to coding to make a game. You need either some skills in 3D modeling, or you can do some nice 2D art, or you just take whatever is free on the internet. But yeah, you also want to have this. Sound as well. Then something like effects is also something completely different from technical point of view. Contains a lot of mathematics and physics, and yeah, that's already then pretty hard to do.
Yeah. Anytime I think about game development, I'm more concerned about design and the idea and what it should be something interesting for a user to install your game.
Definitely, yeah. And with a lot of games out there, I guess that's also pretty hard.
Yeah, it's very competitive nowadays as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's back to your current role as a backend developer. And what challenges you face when you switch from Android to backend?
Challenges that I got a project assigned, which from the first view was pretty nice. But in my team, I'm also the only backend developer now. So I had to deal with a lot of issues on the way by myself, or just like really find someone who can help me. Challenges were, you face some problem, you found a bug maybe, and you want to fix it. And then it's not super clear how to move forward because, code is fine, it compiles. But then you have tools like Docker. Okay, how do I use this tool, make it useful for me? And how do I do changes there? And it is already quite big, this whole ecosystem, and you need to learn a lot of tiny pieces here and there and understand the whole setup of it. And as I mentioned before, we have also quite complex setup for our deployment system environments. So as those things tend to not be documented or written down, because if you work with it, you know how it works. Yeah. So you need to do a lot of research, and it led that I asked many stupid questions to Copilot. It's really helpful for those things. It's like, okay, please explain me this as simple as possible. I don't know what it is. It makes it really easy and faster to learn something new.
These AI tools help like anybody who want to switch to something new, and they can at least get the basic understanding and then help to push toward what they want to do. And how did you? I know you said you had some learning about these tools. How did you deal with like all these new technologies, Kafka, Kubernetes, and Docker, and all this stuff?
I tried to take it piece by piece. So starting with the code, okay, I know how I can navigate through an unknown code base. I mainly use the debugger and see, okay, what's happening, or some log outputs. And then I'm going the next step and see, okay, what's the next thing where I'm failing, and trying to get more information on this. So either asking other people. But first, my initial step is to, chat a lot with Copilot or any other AI tool to get this basic understanding, or that I know which questions I need to ask to my colleague. And also the classical choice, like, okay, doing a Spring Boot course to know, okay, those are the basics. Spring Boot is quite similar in some points to Android development, which really helps. So the dependency injection is pretty similar. It has some differences, but the concept is more or less the same, which really helps.
Like, was there any skill or experience you could reuse in backend from your Android experience?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, in style, it's here and there pretty similar.
The language is the same for you.
The language is the same, that helps immensely. Also, how a build pipeline should look like, how it works. Yeah, and architecture-wise as well. I mean, you can use different architectures, but still you came across a lot of them already in Android development. Yeah, you can easily reuse those concepts as well. Yeah. So from coding-wise, I would say it's not so much different. It looks maybe different and is differently set up depending on the backend project.
You don't have MVVM architecture, do you?
No. So also backend projects, they have different purposes. On an Android project, you want to provide something useful to a user in a nice UI, which works fluently and without too many loading screens and stuff like that. Backend projects can really differ quite a bit. So I'm working currently on a project where we validate documents of users. So like an ID card, okay, this is a valid ID card and this is the same person like on the ID. So you also need to work differently. Then we have a lot of more simple services, which I'm also working on a bit, which are more transforming data from one backend to the front end, like a BFF kind of thing. The shape of the project is often a bit more different than I have seen in Android apps.
And aside from these all new tools, did you find any other difficulties when you switched to backend developer?
Other difficulties.
Like, I don't know, optimization or reducing the response time or these kind of things,
Oh
which is a
yeah.
bit
I mean,
unfamiliar to us.
not yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to face them at some point. Because we have those tools to keep the overview and have alerts in place. Okay, your service is not performing well, and in this case, you need to know. Okay, how can I read the chart? Okay, is it performing well or not? And how do I solve this? I know we had in this component a memory leak, and you would see this in having spikes in this alert box. So that's something you also need to learn, and then also know how to work around this.
I'm done with all the backend question I had. Do you have any advice for an Android developer or any other platforms who want to switch to backend?
I would say just don't be afraid to learn something new, because in the beginning it feels like you take a step back. Like, okay, I was already super fast writing Android code and UI, and I was really good in what I was doing. And then you switch to something new and it's like, okay, I'm super lost. But you learn on the way and you will get good in this again. So yeah, don't be afraid of this feeling that you might not know everything again. So yeah.
And one thing else, I think it's not that easy for Android developer to switch, because they should find the opportunity. Like, you've been lucky, your company are accepting like to switch easily between platforms. And like, if you want to apply, like, I'm an Android developer, I want to apply for a backend development, they ask so many things. Have you worked with this tool, with that? You need to be expert in this kind of topics, and that makes it almost impossible. And you have to have some kind of experience on hand than thinking about backend positions.
Yeah, I agree. I was also always thinking about this. Okay, how should I do this? So probably the best thing is that even if your company does not really support this, try to talk with the backend engineers and get a peek into this. Maybe they can just show you around and explain to you what they use and how they do it, so you at least know what's happening. Maybe you can get your hands on a bit like this. And otherwise, try it in a smaller scale by yourself as a private project. It's also totally doable. You can get all of these tools also for yourself, I think.
Oh, thanks. Very helpful. And we are getting to end of our conversation. I wanted to just finish our topic by asking, what you do in your spare time to relax?
In my spare time, I'm doing all kind of sports and photography sometimes. As I said, also want to get back into game development a bit. But normally I'm trying to get a bit away from the computer in my free time. So I focus more on doing sports, going outside, taking nice pictures.
Cool. Thank you, Melanie, for this call and for the time. And it was very nice to talk with you. And if you have any last to our audience.
Thank you as well. It was a pleasure to be here with you. Last note, just try it. Don't be afraid if you want to switch. And if you don't want to, it's also fine. Android is still a cool thing to do.
Yeah, we can still survive. Android exists, I don't think so. The next few years.
And I mean, if KMP is getting stronger, you're also safe, right? You know Compose, you know Kotlin.
Thank you everyone for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Otaku channel. Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks.